Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Today we continue with our discussion on risk and return. In our last lesson, we considered an illustration where we looked at the past historical returns of two securities, and based on the based on the historical data, we computed the return, which was an average. We also computed the risk of the two securities, A and B. Today, we want to look at another illustration, but this time round, we are looking at we want to consider an illustration where the returns are uncertain, because they are expected in the future. So we are going to look at an illustration where possibilities are provided of expected returns. So the topic, risk and return. Risk and return. We'll take another illustration. We are learning how to calculate risk, how to measure risk. And under this illustration, the equity share of a particular company is yielding the equity share of a particular company is yielding a return of 18% per annum. The equity share of a particular company is yielding a return of 18% per annum. An assessment of the possibilities of the earning capacity. An assessment of the earning capacity of the share, is as shown. An assessment of the earning capacity of the share is as shown. That means that since the return is expected in future, it is not easy to assess the actual return because the future is always uncertain. So the earning capacity of the share in future indicates 1, earning 18% return has a probability. 18% return has a probability of 0.4, and earning of 25% return has a probability of 0.1. Earning 22% has earning probability of 0.1. Next is 20, earning 20% return has a probability of 0.1. Then earning 16% return has probability of 0.3. So this should give us 1.0. So this is the assessment, this is the prediction, this is the probability. The probability that this share will earn 18% is 0.4. The probability that this share will earn 25% is 0.1. The probability that the share will earn 22% is 0.1. The probability the share will earn 20% return has a probability of 0.1, and 16% probability 0.3. 0.3. So out of this, we are expected to calculate the expected return from the share. Calculate the expected return from the share and the associated risk of investing in that share. So that is the question. So we need to calculate, number one, the expected return and the risk associated with that expected return. So solution. And when solving this question, is a very simple one. We multiply the expected earning by the probability. We add the expected earning, which is 25%, by a probability of 0.1, then 22% times 0.1 plus 20% times 0.1 plus 16% times 0.3. That will give us the expected return. So one column here will have possible returns, say x1, possible returns x1, and this is in percentage. The possible returns are here. Possible returns, we are told an assessment of the earning capacity of the share is shown below. These are possible returns. The possibility that this share will earn 18% is 0.4. So here this is percentage, 18%. Possibility of earning 8%, the probability here, probability of earning 18%, this is PI, probability PI of earning 18%, 0.4, and the probability of earning 25%, 0.1, 22%, 0.1, 20%, 0.1, 16%, 0.3. So these are the probabilities of these expected returns. So we need to calculate the expected return from the share. So we will multiply, this is probability of x1, don't forget that, probability of x1. So we are going to multiply x1 by the probability of x1. So this is x1 multiplied by the probability of x1. So we take the calculator, multiply 18 times 0.4, 7.2. We add 25 times 0.1, 2.5. Next, 22 times 0.1 is 2.2. 20 times 0.1, 2.0. 16 times probability of 0.3, 4.8. So we get the total, which is 2 plus 2.2 plus 2.5 plus 7.2. The expected return here is 18.70%. That is the expected return. The expected return is 18.7. This is the summation of x1 times px1, probability of occurrence of x1. So that is the first part of that question. The second part we are expected to answer is the risk. And how do we compute risk? How do we compute the risk? We compute the risk by finding the standard deviation. So we can come here, and from this data we compute the standard deviation. The standard deviation. So from our working here, we have determined the expected return, which is an average, x bar, which is equal to 18.70%. So this is what we'll use to compute the deviations, because we calculate standard deviation. First of all, in calculating the standard deviation, we need to determine the mean, the standard, then which we have done. So we'll come here and determine the deviation from the expected return x bar. What is the deviation? Okay, and this is same as saying x minus x bar. X minus x bar, that will give us the deviations from the average or the expected return. So we come here and compute the deviations from the expected return, which is 18.7. So first of all, we have 18%. So there is a deviation there of 18 minus 18.7. Next is 25, another deviation, 25 minus 18.7. Next we have 22 minus 18.7, 20 minus 18.70, then 16 minus 18.70. This will be equal to, and calculate these values, 18 minus 18.7 is negative 0.7. Next is 25 minus 18.7, 6.3, then 22 minus 18.7, 3.3, 20 minus 18.7, 1.3, 16 minus 18.7, 2.7 negative. So that is x minus x bar. The next stage is to get the square of the deviations. We square these deviations so that we can remove the negative signs. So we'll come here and square 0.7, negative 0.7, 0.49. Next is 6.3, 6.3 squared, 39.69. Then 3.3 squared is equal to 10.89. 1.3 squared, 1.69. Negative 2.7 squared, 2.7 squared, 7.29. So this is square of the deviations. We've squared the deviation to arrive at these values, So the last thing to do here is to get the product of probability and the square of the deviations. The product. We multiply the probability and the square of the deviation. So the probability we know. Probability given in the question. Probability, this probability x1, probability x1, we know it, is 0.4, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, 0.3. So the last thing here to do is to get the product of the probability and the square of the deviations. The square of the deviations. This is the squared deviations. So we get the product. Product means we multiply the square of the deviations and probability. So in the first instance, we have 0.49 times 0.4. This is equal to 0.196. These are points. Next is 39.69 times 0.1, 3.969. Then the other one will be 1.089 followed by 0.690, then 7.29, 7.29 times the product 0.3 is equal to 2.187. So we get the sum here, 0.196, add 3.969, add 1.089, add 0.696, this is supposed to be 1.16 times 0.1 is supposed to be 0.169, 0.169, 0.169, add 2.187, giving variance of 7.61. So this is the variance. That is the variance, and we are supposed to calculate the standard deviation. Standard deviation abbreviated as sigma is equal to the square root of the variance. The square root of the variance, which is equal to square root of 7.61, which will be equal to the square root here is 2.758. This is the standard deviation. That was the question. Calculate the expected return from the share and the associated risk. How do you calculate risk? Risk is determined by calculating the standard deviation. So we have calculated the standard deviation, which is defined as the square root of the average of squared deviations. The square root of the average of squared deviations. So that is the conclusion of our today's lesson, where we took another illustration to help us understand how to measure risk by calculating standard deviation. In our next lesson, we will continue working out other illustrations to help us understand this concept. Thank you, and let's hope to meet in our next lesson.
Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to get yourself a copy of our professionally prepared study text and revision partners. Visit our shop along Tom Boyer Street, Pioneer House, 3rd floor, opposite Fire Station.